We had a demo from JP about the new view forms module that he's working on. We gave some feedback, it was cool. And Sipke showed us the Blazor stuff. It's Blazor components using Orchard and also rendering shapes in WebAssembly on the client with the drivers and everything. Crazy. We talked about branding with Zoltan, and Benedek didn't ship 1.11. So today, October 6th, topics, demos. We have Dean.
Of course, I'm here, so I must do a demo.
Of course, at least one. Who do we have also? That's it. Okay. Do I have anything? Yeah, I've just, feel free to also start any discussion, topic, or whatever, questions. So status, Orchard 1. September 29th, nothing on Orchard 1 has been merged last week. Oh yes, something, no, nothing. Something we did though is that now to be a contributor, to be part of the core team who has write access to the repository, you need to have two-factor authentication enabled on your account. That's something we looked into maybe 3-4 years ago, and we were blocked by a few users who didn't have enabled that, who had not enabled it at that point. But I decided just to find an issue, ping the ones who didn't, and just enable it. And I think Mateo was the last one, or is the last one who needs to enable it. I'm not sure. That is done. Orchard core, more activity there. And I saw so many issues, I'm afraid, for next triage. So fetch, it's done. So I said 29. 6, this should be this one. Upgrade GraphiQL, upgrade Popper.js, fix HTML field settings not showing up. HTML settings not showing up. Yes, and I commented on this issue. So the issue is that it was not targeting the correct location. And Jean-Philippe ensured that other fields did not have the same issue. One little note. I did a demo for Hacktoberfest, and I used tryOrchard.net, and on the version of tryOrchard.net using the agency recipe, I had two issues on the agency recipe, which I could repro every time. So you will tell me, Antoine, if we need to just upgrade the version. First issue was that the preview was only working when I dragged and dropped the services and teams and everything in the bags. But if I was editing a field, it will not show up with the agency recipe. And the default field of the items which are in the bag, like the services, they didn't have the correct editor. They were just like plain HTML body text area. There was no trumboing by default. It was weird. But the preview was working fine on the blog recipe. So using the try.orchardproject.net, try.orchardcore.net. So something to test and to see if we need to upgrade try.orchardcore.net. SHA-to-SHA typo in resource manifest. Typos. Missing null check in database shell setting source. This is just using, and this is a null check. What is that? database shell settings source. Okay, I know what it is. So JSON string. Memory string, get bytes, toString, formatting none. Shell setting to string, serialize to binary. Add JSON string, interesting. So JSON serialized to binary. And what is builder?
Yeah, so that's the iConfiguration builder that we use in the database shells provider. So the extension methods they have take streams.
Okay. That's when that we have to do this dance to be able to add a JSON. It works. I mean, it's the long way. Changed font host version. Okay. Rashdi as a new contributor. I didn't see anything. Where is he? Trust you. What's the contribution here? You should see the code. I don't see anything. Fix inline. Add widget control not using content type setting. Yeah, this one. Yeah. So the settings were not respected in the add widget. Okay. It looks like an old PR. I've seen that some time ago. Prevent disabling or removing administrator role. If you are the last admin. Okay. There's always an if in this case, otherwise. Okay. Fix regression with contained content type. Okay. Shortcodes fixes when used in the FlowPart. Insert shortcode. Turbo with shortcodes. Okay. Shortcodes and shortcodes. So shortcode fixes when used in the FlowPart. These are the two things, fields, and part that use shortcodes.
They're not the only ones. The markdowneditor does as well, but it was working fine. It was just because it pulls in from the Tromboid static values. It was getting set a couple of times every time you added one in.
Fixed 7.1.54.
Yeah, so Niraj fixed something else with shortcodes in the flow editor, and I fixed that one.
This I saw that like too many scripts call or something like that. Okay. Rename SummaryAdmin shapes of ContentsDriver. So this is something that we talked about, I think, during last triage. These shape names were not compatible with defining custom placement. So they have been renamed. They are admin shapes, so the impact is low. But if you have your custom admin theme and you redefine these ones, you will have to change them. Fix layersCache bug. Oh. What does it mean? Because I don't think anyone worked on this file since this has been created. It has been worked on since it has been created. So layersCache, a layersCache is dictionary it's a local cache. Okay. Layer.name, and here. So it was setting it with layer.rule, and now it's setting it with layer.name. Okay. So what is that? So we say.
Yeah, so the cache is just for the rule evaluations, whether or not
I see.
The JavaScript is processed multiple times.
Yeah. So if you have like 10 widgets and you have 3 layers and well, 10 widgets using the same layer, then the layer will be evaluated only once. Okay.
Yeah, I think he said he was doing some work with the mini profiler and mostly getting a couple of SQL queries out of it. So good fit, good spot.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Just thinking if something in the cache could be wrong, like there is no state in the layer rules. You can't have, you can't have, technically you can, but you don't do that. You don't define a global counter and increment it like, unless you have a random, this could be an issue. If you have a random layer with a random number, like, and we've done that by the past, because I'm sure we've done that. I remember that in Orchard1, like someone wanted to create a random layer, like something appears randomly. Let's say A/B testing, for instance, or you just want to show a widget randomly, or 3 widgets randomly. I don't know. So the layer could have a randomized score, and then this will not work. That might be interesting to think about, being able to say, I don't want to cache this layer, because it won't work in this case. You see, for A/B testing, for instance, that will make sense. No, not really, actually. If you have 2 requests, there will be a new cache. So it's during the request, so that will still work. Okay, so it's lowering the exposure of this issue. Okay, that's good. Upgrade test package dependencies. Ooh. Okay. Wow, big jump. Okay, on start. Okay. Server side is as a contributor. Updated the docs for layers to make always layer rule clearer. Yeah. So this was not explained clearly about what's the rule, what's the layer. So Richard updated it. Richard was very famous from us because he used to be a huge Orchard1 user and contributor. And now he's in core. I think he had a blog. Null check. Okay, the toggle connection string stuff, the new thing, because every new feature comes with its bugs. Resource manifest, use view production version. Okay, so updating IC. Sad we didn't see that when we reviewed the code. Because I think this was added recently, right? Vue.js in the resource manifest. Made alias field lookup case insensitive. So this is to fix the fact that in Postgres some fields would be case sensitive, and I don't think Carl tried explicitly on Postgres, but he tried that the change worked on SQL Server at least, and I'm not sure that this was the issue. So I hope someone who filed the issue will be able to confirm it's fixing it. Because to me, it looked like the stored metadata was not case sensitive and should have been not the lookup, but the data that is stored. So we'll see. Open IDICT bump twice. Happens all the time. Avoid features, URL blocking by IIS. So IIS has some default filters for security, like you can't have specific words in the URL, or it like as the last, like sitemaps in this case. Sitemap, I don't know which one, but there are a few words like this that you can say, no, I can't serve a sitemap, so I won't let you type it in the URL. Okay, so the solution is to just put it before, not at the end. So in this case, the feature ID now is there. So we hope that IIS won't change to disable, and enable. But well, yeah, so that's a good change. The route, update package dependencies version. Okay. Extra keys, F11 full screen, escape. Version name was not appearing. Okay. mkdocs material updates. Fix sizing of editor settings to be consistent and placed constantly in the correct zones. Editor settings. Markdown body part settings. Content part field. Okay, so this one will be at the top and this one, okay, I see, because they were on, well, this one was on editor, this was on content, but if they were just on content, the order might be random sometimes. So now it's 20.
And the order turned out to be quite random because it all depends on startup registrations, and Markdown and HTML start at different times. So
okay. Yeah, so something we could do actually is to make it deterministic. Like if no specific discriminator is provided, like in this case, a content, and we say okay, 20. Okay. Which means something else which has 10 is just okay, it will be before. But if someone copies that and says okay, 20 again, we'll have the same issue maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. But maybe that would be interesting to say that placement in the logic would always add some kind of hashing based on the shape name, for instance, such that as a last resort, such that whatever you set will prevail, but we add a hash at the end such that it's always deterministic. So even if you didn't say anything, then it will be deterministic based on the name. So it will not, change. It will be just based on the name and not based on the order of registration in this case. So now you decided that. Okay. Update Nuget package. Which one? HTML sanitizer. Minor update and message back. Almost done. Add wrapper for content type. Nearage the head of wrappers. Form content display in form wrapper. Okay, this is for forms. Okay. Expose route property on request object. Interesting. Oh, route right. Okay, I see. We talked about. Don't we have that already? We talked about it. No, I know when we talked about. Oh, dude. I know when we talked about it, and we talked about it with Sipke, but it was not. So do you remember it when we talked about it?
Oh, I remember. And this VR came in the next day, and it's been sitting there for ages waiting for Sipke to write the docs. So he wrote the docs yesterday, and we merged it. But we're still waiting for the big PR of templatable routes.
Thank you. That's why. Yeah. Why nobody has worked on that yet? It's not hard. It's easy. So useful.
It is quite easy, but yeah, you have to merge JT's distributed branch, so that because he's worked on the auto route in there, and
okay,
and
yeah,
it's changed. So,
okay,
yeah, so we'll merge that, and then we can start work on other auto route bits because it should be easy, and people have been asking for it on Gitter.
If we created a new CMS, this would be the feature to implement dynamic routing. Recipe should send whole description. Okay, so apparently the recipe was not importing that thing. Good job. Richard again, how many things did he contribute this week? And then the badge. Okay, awesome. Questions, comments? Anything? Why is it so small? That's normal. Okay. Demos. Bin. Whatever you want.
Let me share my screen. So just to give a little background, we looked probably a couple of weeks ago at image profiles, which is a PR sitting there, and it's probably pretty ready to merge. I just put it on hold because I came up with a few other things on the weekend to do with managing alt text and managing crop centering on images. And I wanted to just kind of extend on what we did with the profiles there. So the idea is now that I should start with the content type, the most boring bit. On, say, something like the blog, on the media field, we have two new options. One is allow alt text, and one is allow center cropping. So when you enable those, you get two new buttons here. First one, reasonably simple, just gives you a modal for the alt text, or in the case of multiple images, move that one away. You can also have the alt text for the second image as being different. So that gets stored in an array because obviously there's the possibility of having multiple images there, and we keep the indexes the same as the image array. I'll show a little bit more detail on that shortly. But the interesting thing that I've added as well is a kind of crop center. So let me open the preview so we can have a look at it. Get rid of that. So we talked about this, I think, last week at Triage, and I argued for an image editor. And then I sat down with a client to do some CMS training late last week. And all of the images on her new site were just out a little bit on the crops, and it got in the way of the training a little bit. And we tweaked them rather quickly, but we had to edit the images, and it was all just rather painful. So what we've got, I grabbed one of the sample images from the website, which applies on a banner. And so you have this nice little image here, but you've only got the person's head, which is just not what you want. So what we can do is just specify a crop point here, and suddenly we're seeing the center of the image, how we'd like it.
And it's because the banner, the theme defines the banner with a crop argument on image sharp.
That's correct. Yeah, that's exactly it. So the theme template defines what size this image is going to be. And I kind of probably see it as a function of the template and the developer to say what space is available for an image. But it's a useful thing for a content editor when they are actually selecting an image to select one that's approximately the right size and be able to vary how it's displayed.
The demo effect is super cool because you have the preview, you click somewhere and you see exactly what will be rendered on the blog. It's great.
And it's exactly what you need to have, because you need to see it in preview, because you never quite know when you pick one of these what it's really going to look like in here. And I'll show you an example of when it would be just kind of wrong, or when your impression. So if for example, we were to do something foolish, like try and take this vertical image or, and put it in here, then the image isn't matching at all the outcome. So if you don't have the preview, then you click here and you don't know what you're going to necessarily see or what size of the image you're going to see. But when the preview is there, you can just tweak on it a little bit.
So can we see the arguments on the image actually? Because now I'm wondering, should it be some properties on the editor itself so that you can see what it will look like? But if you say it depends on what you type in the image URL, then I want to understand now what you type to.
Yep, and that's kind of a point for discussion. So, and part of the discussion here we need to have as well is about disk filling. So if we go xy equals 0.1, 0.2, and let's grab that other image name because it's a home banner. Home banner. So the arguments are a float. They're a multi-dimensional float array. So anything from 0.9 or 1 defines it, and you can go as 0. Detailed as 0.999, for example, or 45, because of course they're a float. So I did wonder about doing this. So what I've done is I've reduced what image sharp will actually accept to 2 points of the float. Because the problem is if you put this one in, then you're actually making a new image on your disk, and if you put this one in, you're making another new image on your disk. So there's this kind of opportunity to overfill your disk.
But we have designed a solution for that.
And the solution was to remove those attributes originally.
Nope, it's to use but to use an encrypted query string that on the server side can generate and read and decrypt, which means when we generate the URL, So you type in your code, for instance, in your tags, in your shortcodes and everything, you type that, whatever you want, okay? But because it's evaluated on server side, we can generate a query string that will be the serialization, the encrypted serialization of the actual payload for ImageSharp. And then when the request comes in, we can instruct ImageSharp to decrypt it and to read it in a different way with a command processor. And this way,
that's an option, yeah. You
can't make up URLs. You can only get them from the server side and let you write whatever you want. And that's and that's a way that should be opt-in when you write it, like maybe with an argument, which is foo equals encrypt or whatever on the URL. And then we can then just use this mode at that time. Or by default.
So the encrypted values would have to be stored somewhere so that you could.
No, you just encrypt. You just serialize and encrypt this query string.
But if you encrypt this query string, you'll end up with a different encryption key.
What do you mean encryption key?
You'll end up with a different query string.
Yeah.
And this one will be a different query string again.
Yeah, but it has been set by the server side, so you decided what values you wanted. You get the security issue with the disk filling only if you let external users type URLs indefinitely. But here they can't, because they will say, you see,
because if we take this and make it a random URL, let me just understand what you're saying, because something, and if that's not encryptable, it just gets ignored. Not decryptable, yeah. Sorry, it just gets ignored.
The ImageSharp filter, the command processor will say, I don't understand that, so I'm not handling that with ImageSharp. Go on, and you'll get the original file, like today.
Yep.
That's the idea. And it can be a custom query string, like it can be like not profile equals, but parameters equal an encrypted value. And if we see parameters equal, then we're like, okay, we need to decrypt it to change the command arguments live for the next filter to actually read crop, width, height, and so on.
So that would solve that problem well.
All the problems. And in
all I've done
in this case,
is reduced it to 2 floats, which is still a lot of.
And same thing for width and height that we have to set up somewhere and to define. So if we had the encrypted thing, then you don't have to block anything. There is some cost of processing, but I think that will be super cheap because we've seen that even we can even cache the results actually, if we want on the server side. That's not an issue.
Yeah, so, I mean, decryption and encryption is a light process. It's making the encryptor that's expensive.
Yeah, and then I think that's really fun. We can cache all the things, encryption and decryption. That's not an issue.
I like it.
Okay. It should take an hour to develop.
Well, actually, it probably is reasonably trivial. So the other question that I've been asking myself about this one is whether or not this should know about profiles. I need to make that size better, but I'll do that later. Whether or not it's useful to have a selector here for which profile you're defining a crop center or not. I kind of think that's probably more than it needs.
So are you suggesting that not in this window, but in the screen before, you have a drop down to select the profile instead of selecting anything?
So you could do that.
But I don't see I don't like it because then it means it's a property on the field. Some data, and then your theme will have to say, okay, there might be a profile, so let's use a profile.
And then it just starts getting really complicated, and the templates start getting really complicated.
So, even for that feature here, it might get complicated, no?
It's a little bit complicated, but it's not too bad. The template for this now looks like, find it.
That's why it has to be per field, because the theme itself needs to understand that this field can have cropping parameters.
It does. It needs to be per field. you know, potentially we could store this information against an image. I did think of a couple of ways we could do that, but the more I kind of think about it, it's quite possible this image could get reused potentially, you know, somewhere else in the site in a different size. So it makes much more sense that you just pick it there on the field. So code-wise, you've got the paths value, then you've got the centers value, and that just becomes another parameter here. So reasonably easy to deal with in the templates. And if it was multiple images, you know, it would be paths. Because they're kept in sync. But if the field doesn't have that allow button, centers is going to be null. It's not part of the hard type model. It's just part of the JSON payload. I'll show the code for that. Oh, so the alt text and the centers just go as part of the payload rather than being part of the filter model. So it's not extending the model particularly. In the same way we did tags when we did the extensions on taxonomies. Yeah, so that's pretty much the demo.
That's cool. I will have a comment. The alt text might just be by default, you know, enabled. I don't see why you will have to check to be able to set the alt text.
Well, it's something you have to deal with in your template. So
yeah,
if you haven't selected it, then like in here, there's no point in having an alt text because it's a background image. So why would you ever? You would never assign an alt text to this particular field.
Yeah, but
so you'd never want to.
But then I will disable it there then, but enable by default because most images should have the alt text by default.
Ah, you mean put the setting on by default?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And disable it for the background. Yes. Okay. And I'm not even sure that in terms of accessibility, you still don't want an alt text for a background image.
Well, because it goes on a background of, so you've got.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you an expert?
It can still go on an attribute on the tag that contains the background. It can be on the header. You can have a title on the header.
All right then. Cool.
And then maybe change our templates, or default templates, to use the alt text that you will now have by default.
Wait, the header should have contents. It has text contents, so that's the alt.
Yeah, I mean, the header itself should actually have some some content, but in this particular template, oh, does it? Where's the end of the header? Yeah, header is here.
So it's simpler. Yeah, so you don't need it here.
Cool.
Do you agree with keeping? So if we're going to say the alt text is on by default, would you keep it? Would you put it on the field as an actual hard-coded property, or would you just leave it as these extensions?
I think you can add it. Yeah. Just this one, just the alt text.
Yeah,
No. Let me think. It's a media field. It's a media field.
So it's a media field.
Don't add it yet.
Yeah.
Because it's a media field. We don't say it's an image or video or whatever. It's a media field. I prefer not to add it yet.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but arguably, any media is susceptible to accessibility issues. So.
But for example, if we have PDF files selected here.
But in this case, be careful because a media field, in our case, can have multiple paths. Okay, so multiple resources. this is what our media field is. But how many alt text to add to a media field? As many as we have path?
That's what I decided.
And now I'm discussing the string.
Why would you have a different text per?
See?
Yeah,
That's why
it doesn't.
Well, if for example you showed this, and if this was a carousel,
this is a media field which has multiple paths. That's
oh, okay. Yeah, I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
You can argue about why do we have a media field that have multiple media.
That's another argument again.
It should be a cardinality of the field.
Yeah, so maybe it depends on it. It should be on the actual, not on the media field, but on the actual media themselves, on each of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And here the discussion is that should we make the property inside the class media field, or should we leave it as a metadata on the JSON payload? And if you know it's there, you use it. It's not a mandatory property. I mean, well, if it's there and we know it can be there, we can put the property on the class for sure.
I would say it's probably shouldn't go on there, because if for example these were two PDFs and you were selecting PDFs, alt text is just not as relevant there. Or maybe, or another scenario, I've got one site where I host executable files. I definitely don't want an alt text on them.
Could it title?
In that case, I could use it as a title. But it's not something that particular site has any use for.
Yeah, I call it alt text because people who put a PDF file, they can use alt text if they want.
As the title could work.
Yeah.
I've put it on the view model.
If you change the type, if you change it now, though, well, it won't be breaking change because it's a new one. So the old ones don't have it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, it's on the view model, and the template here, it's just accessible because it's just JSON anyway, and a liquid template.
Yep, I don't care. There are pros and cons for both decisions, and up to you.
Cool. Well, because they're an optional, and because the centers thing is very much an optional.
This one just stayed there like this. Yeah.
It definitely stays here. Yeah.
Let's center a PDF. Oop.
It doesn't make sense. Cool. Okay. I'm going to look into this idea of encryption as well, because
there's an issue for that. I describe it.
Yeah. No, I haven't seen that issue, but I get the description. It makes sense. Yeah, we can figure out something there, I think.
Using the encryption.
Yeah, just using an encryption service.
And it doesn't have to be an encryption that is serialized. I mean, because it has to be because of cache. That's the only reason. But during an instance, it can be a new key. Doesn't matter. It can be using data protection keys actually, because you use the data protection keys.
Yeah, no, it would be definitely data protection keys, wouldn't it? Yeah. No problem there. Cool. All right.
Thank you. Good job. Okay, so I will share again, but I think I don't have much more. Maybe some updates. Topics, any questions, comments? Anything you want to talk about? Masks, whatever. So I think last week I merged the change we talked about for the in filters without predicate, and 4 days ago, this weekend I worked on that. So this is I need to find the PR because there is exam. Well, no, I don't. There is a test. There are tests. So let me show you. There is a new syntax and new features. I need to open the PR. So the issue was that if you have an index like a text field index, which I mean in Orchard, okay, you have the text field, and there is a feature which is the SQL indices, that script that Jasmin has done, that will index every text field or other field into its own table. So you can do queries to find all content items that have a specific field with a specific value, okay? Because we have a table that stores all the values of this field that you can query. The issue now is that we had with YesSql is that if you want to do a query on a content type that has two text fields, and with a query on these two text fields, like field A equals that and field B equals that, then you could not do that with YesSql, because you would just be able to say with text field index a value or a predicate. And if you call it again with text field index, it will be a single where in the SQL query with an end on the same field, the same row. And there is no row that will have, for instance, one value and the other, or one field name and the other field name. Okay, so that didn't work. So what we needed is to be able to project on two different tables. And now there is a syntax for that. Actually, that's not what I wanted to open. So I lost the discussion. I don't get it. What did I do? Oh no, that's not that PR. That's this one. And so I did that, and I didn't like the way it was done. Then I thought about converting it to this thing. So the idea is now when you have a query, you can say .any, and every predicate will be done in a different table, any being an or and all being an and. So in this case, I'm querying on the same index, article by word, article by word, article by word, or it could be text field index, text field index, text field index. But each of the calls on with will be a different projection, a different inner join in this case, which means they will be, you can accumulate the three of them with different Boolean expressions. So in this case, it will be an or between this expression and the end on this expression. So here I'm looking for an article that has the word pink or the words green and fox. And this is what it looks like in the query. It projects three different tables, and it says, okay, on this projection, you search for the word pink, or which has this word or this word, okay? And this will give you all the articles. So that's the syntax now. And it's not breaking change, because if you had .query .with and .with, it will still behave the same way as before. It will be a single projection with two with, okay? So if you project on the same table, then it will be an end on the same table, the same projection. So you have to query on different fields in this case, different properties. Okay, so that's how it's done now. And it doesn't add any more complex queries. It's just if you want to use this feature, now you can. And next step, I like to try to see if I can improve this article by word sample, which is like a full text index, but using a table of words and a bridge table to each article using YesSql like this. So that's it. And this other PR, which was, there is now a is not in, but this is very specific query that you might not care about. That's it. Questions? This one, this one. Questions, comments? And Soteris is here, and Soteris is super happy because now Azure is also in Greece. There is a data center in Greece. So Soteris will be the first customer of the data center.
Yeah.
So that this morning.
Probably. Yes.
I hope with Orchard, you need to deploy an Orchard site on the Azure data center in Greece. Okay, all good, no questions? Thank you then. See you on Thursday for triage and next Tuesday for the next meeting. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.